Peace and blessings to the tribe. Let's talk about relationships today. When it comes to relationships, I like to look at three things as being the trinity of sorts for any positive relationship or any beneficial relationship. It needs to have three things. And the first one is communication. Communication is so important, and I think it's important to highlight on the fact that most people are not taught how to communicate properly. Instead, people put together a system of beliefs based upon their environment. Your environment dictates your path. See, if your environment requires a savior, then your path as a savior, again, is already predetermined by your environment. Your creation was due to the preconditions that existed before you. And so when we look at communication, communication is so important because it is about the transference, the relaying of energy. And this is important because when you know how to properly convey a message, when you know how to properly communicate how you are feeling, your state of being, then another person, another system is able to extrapolate off that data and produce results, produce predictions, produce educated guesses based upon your input. And this is why it's important, because let's say you go see a doctor and you communicate all of the wrong symptoms. The doctor prescribes you a medication for something that in reality you do not have, but because of what you describe to the doctor to the T, everything is now hinged upon your word, your understanding of your body, your systems. And so now you're prescribed a medication. You are given a label for a disease that you may or may not have. And by doing so, you now introduce a new variable into your universe, into your reality, a synthesized drug. And let's think about what a drug is, right? A drug has the potential for addiction, but a drug is not addiction in itself. A drug is a means of expressing addiction. And so when we think about the energy of addiction, most of us, if not all of us, are addicted to something. However, some people are more strategic and more smart when it comes to picking the things that they are addicted to. You know, there is a spectrum of things that you can become addicted to, whether that be social media, television, movies, popular culture, any aspect, drugs, release, any form of release, escapism. All these things can become addictive. However, there are some healthy addictions and there are some unhealthy addictions. And this is just based upon a societal spectrum that has been put forth before any of us existed. And while this spectrum has mutated a little over time, it's for the most part remains largely intact in that communication is broken up. There's many different languages. If you are familiar with the Tower of Babel or the story of the Tower of Babel, Babylon, this was essentially about a story where, similar to Icarus flying too high, too close to the sun, too close to the energy source melted his wings, melted his ability to fly, and caused him to crash into the ground. This is again an allegory for one getting too close to the source, and there's this fear, right? This fear created of once you get too close to this source, you are going to lose your wings. You're going to lose your ability to fly. And for the large part, that is how relationships are seen. You know, you lose your ability to have multiple women to do these things. But you have to understand the idea of a relationship, and not just in a dating sense, but let's say even in a business sense, right? When you look at relationships, understand that the other part or the other party, the other side is going to try and convey something to you, right? Depending on how you interpret what is conveyed, and depending on whatever filters you may have based upon your environment or upbringing, these things affect the actual message being delivered. And so what you may think is communicating may not actually be communicating. And you have to acknowledge this, because most people think, I can communicate. I've been doing it my whole life. I've been speaking. But there is an art when it comes to communication. And the reason I'm giving such even a vast backstory is because you have to understand, don't think about ideas as the actual ideas themselves. Don't think of a relationship as two people coming into contract, coming into union, right? But rather think of them as an energy. And this energy brings some people joy, right? Some people enjoy being in a relationship because of the energy it provides for them, the sense of purpose it provides for them, the sense of fulfillment it provides for them. This is entirely subjective. There are people who, on the contrary, feel completely opposite to this. And so when you understand that relationships start with self, you know, how you treat yourself is how you're going to treat somebody else. You very rarely, you know, outside from maybe your mother, grandmother, you know, few individuals, pretty much these kind of maternal or protector individuals, outside of these individuals, you are going to develop a sense of, or rather, you can develop a sense of codependency very quickly when you are not removed from the things that provide you comfort and care. And not removed in the sense of completely taken away from, but provided some sense of independence. When a parent, for instance, is overbearing, or like a helicopter parent, there is going to be a lasting effect on the child, where the child then seeks out a partner who is exhibiting that same type of energy, that same type of domineering, overarching energy, who is going to be looking over everything they're doing, maybe checking over their bank accounts, maybe looking through their phone, maybe going above and beyond to exercise a form of control over their life. And this is because, again, this is derived from a childhood trauma of sorts. And depending on how a person was parented, this trauma style is going to vary. And typically people choose partners based upon their trauma, because they lack the self-awareness of how their trauma is essentially causing them to place themselves into the environment in which these relationships are possible to make happen, right? Everything is by design. There are structures and institutions put in place that essentially have a SOP, a standard operating procedures. So they have a guide for how to combat certain terms, certain loopholes that people manage to find. Society as a greater whole managed to close those loopholes, introduce legislation. And so it's okay if a few people get through, for instance. But on a larger scale, there has to be a mechanism of confusion. So this mechanism of confusion comes from, again, a lack of union, a lack of communication. Because if people are not able to communicate how they effectively feel, they may not even realize that they're feeling the same things. And so they may think that another person is not feeling that, and therein lies the confusion, because there is a desire to reach a point of singularity, reach a point of oneness. And when it comes to a relationship, this introduces a new dynamic, a new variable that has to be factored into a person's way of living in order to become efficient, in order to become productive. But again, it depends on what it is that you desire out of a relationship. If you're going into a relationship just because you think it's the thing to do, this is incorrect. If you are going into it with a mentality of building, finding someone who is on the same page as you, and becoming a value to their life, as well as them being a value to your life, then this is a better way of looking at it, because this is retaining your individuality and not giving it up in exchange for the identity of a relationship. You see, some people need the identity of a relationship because they don't have an individual identity. And so they rely on the relationship to identify for them. They become identified by the relationship. This is not good, because when you lose your form of individuality, you again are going to just do everything with the grain. You're not going to go in opposition, because that would disrupt your reality, your false reality that you've created. And it's so easy for us to create false realities. It's so easy for us to go into a relationship with rose-colored glasses on, the rose-colored glasses essentially being our past and our trauma and the lens that we see things through. Sometimes there is no alternative but to respond to a situation like a hurt child, because there is no code on how to deal with that situation. That is what happens with trauma. Trauma is the system breaking. Some part of the system breaks. And so after that, the system adapts. It does its best to overcome without that part, without that area, without that energy, whatever it may be. So going back to the three things, the first being communication, the second is confidence. Confidence is different than trust, and this is very, very important to highlight, because I don't even use the word trust in my vocabulary anymore. Or rather, when I do, it is very, very selectively. And why? Is because I have realized that when you say trust, what you're really saying is work for. Just replace, anytime you hear the word trust, replace it with work for. So instead of saying, oh, I trust him, no, say I work for him. Because trust is something to be earned, just like a currency when you go to a job. It is a conditional form of love that is based upon conditions being met and then the trust being given out as the currency. And so when you rather have confidence in a person, this is completely different, because I have confidence in a person's character that they are going to do what's best for not only themselves, but factor in my existence. I have confidence that I can put my faith into a character who shows me repeatedly through their actions that they are determined to evolve, to grow, to better themselves. This is the fundamental difference when you have confidence in someone versus when you trust someone. When you trust someone, you're just working for them. And make no mistake, a relationship is a job. It is work. However, when you are confident in your employer and who you are employing, that is a fundamental difference between trusting, because even when you go with trust, there's a saying, trust but verify. See, there's this 2-layer authentication that comes with trust. You still have to verify. Whereas if I have the confidence, I'm not verifying anything because I have the confidence, and that is different from trust that has to be earned. Confidence is unconditional when I'm not placing the conditions upon it. I'm simply observing the character and saying, you know what? This person makes me feel confident. But if a person is demonstrating sneaky ways, being just really obscure, doing things outside of nature, outside of their behavior, then again, these are things that don't inspire confidence. And at that point, that's not somebody I'm going to want to be in a relationship with, And when it comes to the final C, it is contracts. Understand that everything in relationships, everything in this world is contracts. The more you understand contracts, the more you understand what you are giving up, because it takes 3 things for a contract to be valid: an offer, an acceptance, and then consideration. So with those 3 things, once you got an offer, acceptance, and consideration, you've got a valid contract, right? So if I walk up to you, I offer you a $5, and you say, okay, cool, I'll accept that $5, but what am I getting in exchange? And I say, well, you just gotta work for me for the next 90 years. And you're just like, wait a minute. 1, that doesn't even sound reasonable. How am I gonna work for you for 90 years for $5? And 2, that doesn't even sound lawful, because again, how am I going to be indebted to you for these amount of years in exchange for this amount of consideration? $5 is the consideration. If maybe it was $2 million, okay, maybe I reconsider. That is the consideration. So when you understand contracts and you understand that everything is you agreeing to things, you can get yourself out of trouble before you even get into trouble, because you know what you're agreeing to and you know what you're exchanging. You have to pay attention to the fine print and what people are asking of you, because if you do not understand this and you go into a contract with somebody that you do not want to be in business with, somebody who is unethical, somebody who does not have the same moral conduct or moral standard as you, this is where you'll suffer. Now, I fully believe anything you create, you can uncreate, but it is a matter of utilizing imagination and creativity to perhaps conjure a situation that may not even exist in this universe and pulling it into this universe, because everything is vibrational based. So when you understand this is a vibrational based reality, then you can begin to extrapolate upon how everything is built, how the phone, the computers, the TVs, how all these things are built and distributed, but they first are derived from an idea, and an idea within an organization. An organization is, again, putting together a bunch of bodies who share the same belief in this organization, who see through an idea and turn it into a actual tangible product. This is how companies are formed. This is how products are made. It starts with organization. Cells organize, divide, create new units, create new models, create new systems of belief that all distribute the organization's fundamental way of life, the fundamental principles that keep that organization alive. This could be good or bad. It's just dependent upon the organization, And when you're looking at relationships, again, the three things: communication, confidence, and contracts. Communication, confidence, and contracts. These are the three things that are required for any relationship to be successful, because the more you understand these things, the better you are to anybody else, because you can't save anybody else if you're on fire. It's just plain and simple. You got to put the fire out first, then maybe we go see about talking to other people, this, that, and the third. But you got to put yourself out first, and that's just the main thing to understand when it comes to relationships, family, is that it starts with you and it ends with you. You come into this world alone and you'll leave this world alone. Relationships should be seen as something that's just extra icing on top of the cake, but something absolutely not necessary unless the conditions are met and there's actual value being provided on both sides. Otherwise, again, it's a parasitic relationship, and that's not something that we want to get into. We don't want any type of parasitic relationships or nothing like that. We want to make sure that we are going into relationships, business relationships, whether it be personal or business. We want to make sure that we're going into relationships with a clear conscience, a clear heart, clear intentions, and that there's no confusion in our actions. Confusion comes from things that are not resolved. When we refuse to deal with things, when we refuse to educate ourselves, that's when we become confused. But anything that brings you confusion is just letting you know you need to spend more time in that area. So if communicating confuses you, you need to spend more time in that area. If confidence confuses you, you need to spend more time in that area. If contracts confuses you, you need to spend more time in that area. It's as simple as that. And when you understand, it doesn't matter where you are in life, you can always leapfrog the next person just by applying information. And that is what wisdom is. Wisdom is applied information. When you can apply the information of someone else to your life and save yourself 20 years of sacrifice, 20 years of struggle, that is a dub. And so you got to understand and look for information in all places. Do not discriminate on the information. Now, there is a level of discernment. You need to understand where the energy is coming from and the biases that may be applied towards that information. But information is information. I take it and I understand it and I apply it in the best way I know how, because that is what has worked for me, and that is what has worked throughout civilization. You have to fail forward. That is the only way. But if you're scared to fail, you'll never move forward. You'll stay right where you are. But if you continue to fail, eventually you're going to fall over that finish line. And again, it's a matter of movement. It's a matter of motion. Even if you don't have all the answers, fail forward, because you're going to get some more answers just by failing forward. So it's a bit of trial and error, family, but that's basically relationships. Just understand that it's about you first before anybody else. Once you get you straight, then you can jump into the world and think about, extra this and that. But you got to start with you first, because until you understand why you even want to be in a relationship, that is a problem, because you can be getting into something that you don't even want, just because, again, it's trying to keep up fear of missing out, thinking that everybody else is happy in a relationship, and that may not be the case. So it's all about what's best for you, family, and determining that by failing, by going through experiences that reflect the choices you make in your life, and whether those choices are good or bad to you. That's the only way to gauge how that's the only way to gauge your progress in this life, is to understand your ability to process, to communicate, your confidence level, and your ability to create and to enter into contracts, to assume liability. That's what it means to enter into a contract, is to assume liability. That is to take responsibility. You can't do that if you are in a victim mentality. You have to assume the responsibility in your choices and take the lessons from that, apply the information, and turn that into wisdom. Once you do that, you golden. So just keep at it.